Hey, welcome back to Two Old Geeks Talking. I'm Rob,
I'm Trace.
and today we're discussing
Daredevil.
Daredevil.
All right. I love Daredevil. Of course, you love Batman.
Right?
And a lot of times Daredevil and Batman get compared together for some
See,
reason.
I always think of Daredevil and Spider-Man being compared.
Maybe it's because they both got little horns in their head.
Yeah,
or maybe,
I think they both have like spidey senses.
Yeah, possibly. Could be. But anyway, I love Daredevil. In fact, this is my Holy Grail comic that I always wanted.
We all have a Holy Grail comic.
Yes. It's Daredevil #1, which is the first appearance of Daredevil, which makes sense.
Right?
And also first appearance of Foggy Nelson and Karen Page. And come out in 1964. Stan Lee wrote it. Bill Everett drew it. And Jack Kirby had a little influence in there. How much, we don't know. But he was in the same room with them, so I'm sure they kind of bounced ideas off each other. But Daredevil's about Matt Murdock. And little Matt Murdock was going across the street one day, and he saw an old man. Maybe he might look like me, I don't remember.
Mm-hmm.
And he was crossing the street. He was getting ready to be run over by a truck. Good old Matt pushed the old man out of the way. Truck swerved. Truck was carrying toxic chemicals that splashed the young Matt in the face. And but the good news is it heightened all his other senses. It blinded him, but it heightened all his other senses.
Good news, everyone.
And he's got like a radar sense, so he can see, but he doesn't see exactly like us. So it debuted in 1964. Just a few issues later, issue 7, they changed his costume from yellow to red because people were writing in and they were saying, hey, we don't like the yellow and red costume. And
Right.
So they made him red. And Stan Lee said, this is how much thought he put into it. They come to him and was like, hey, Stan, they don't like the yellow costume. He's like, make it red.
Well, okay, so I heard Stan was asked to be a part of Daredevil, and he was kind of concerned that the character was blind, and he was worried about offending the blind community.
Yeah.
And that he would literally pull his name off of it if it started to offend people. But like you said, they kind of took to it and was like, hey, we've got representation. This is awesome.
Yeah, Marvel always had flawed characters, and so when they made a handicapped character that was blind, they didn't want to alienate or upset blind people. But they really took to it.
Now, isn't it true that his red and yellow suit was actually kind of built off his father's boxing?
Yeah, his father
Was it made from his boxing?
Yeah,
outfit?
his father. He was raised by a single parent, battling Jack Murdock, who was a boxer, and he wanted his son to improve on himself, so he really pushed him in his homework. And so Matt became a lawyer, and he fights criminals in the courtroom during the day, and then
out of the courtroom.
Yeah, and then outside the vigilante at night. So this issue was drawn by Wally Wood. You probably never heard of Wally Wood.
No, I hadn't.
Wally Wood is a famous early Marvel artist. Great art. Wally had a little bit of a drinking problem, and in fact, it led to his demise. He had like 3 or 4 heart attacks before he died. He got let go of Marvel because he wouldn't turn his stuff in on time. But he's a great artist. He's really underrated. You don't hear much about him. Partially probably because afterwards he went into porn comics. And most porn comics aren't drawn by the best artists, but Wally Wood, he could really draw.
With a name like Wally Wood,
yeah.
He would probably be in the right
Yeah,
spot.
so if you ever get a chance to look up Disney Orgy, that was one of the pictures he drew.
I think I'll pass.
Yeah. The thing about a superhero is they're really only as good as their villains. I mean, what's Batman without the Joker? What's Superman without Lex Luthor?
Right.
Lex Luthor.
That's why I usually root for the bad guys.
Yeah, so Daredevil wasn't popular at first, partially because of some of his bad guys. So he had the Owl, which was he had funny hairdo and sharp fingernails.
Right.
Yeah, so not really too intimidating there. He had Purple Man, which Purple Man was a guy that dressed purple and had purple skin.
Okay.
He was kind of like a living Simon Says, whatever he said you had to do.
That'd been a better name.
Yeah. But they fleshed out the character in Jessica Jones' Netflix series. He was in there. He was real creepy in there. But he was kind of hokey in the early Daredevils. And then Stiltman. Yeah, he was one of the villains for Daredevil. Stiltman was a guy with stilts.
Right.
Yeah, so you had to trip him up to beat him. But so because of the corny villains and really kind of the childish writing in a way, early Daredevil really didn't take off. But later Daredevil super popular. So since Daredevil is in New York City, he runs into Spider-Man all the time because Spider-Man's in New York City. Daredevil's primarily in a place called Hell's Kitchen. Hell's Kitchen is right outside Times Square. And it is just a few blocks away.
So I didn't know that was a real place until, ain't there like a cooking show that was based off of Hell's Kitchen?
There's a cooking show that's got hell in the title. I don't know what's about. Right. But yeah, Hell's Kitchen is it was like a early Irish immigrant place. It was real rough, real poor, and that's where it's stationed now. Hell's Kitchen now, because it's so close to Times Square, the real estate's outrageous. They got like a little bunch of coffee shops. It's a real yuppie place to hang out. But Daredevil really didn't hit his popularity until a man come along named Frank Miller.
Right.
And man, Frank Miller can write. And so he said, look, this is a kiddie comic. Kids don't even read comics anymore. So he took it to a more adult place. And so a lot of people said it was too violent, but Frank himself described it. He said, when I started writing Daredevil, he said it was like a guy walking into a kid's birthday party carrying a bottle of whiskey.
Right.
He said that was the reception that he got.
Yeah, I've always thought Frank Miller had like a nitty-gritty realism that he brought to everything that he wrote for.
Yeah, I mean, he did to Daredevil what he also did to Batman.
Right.
And I think his influence on Daredevil, I know his influence on Daredevil continues today. And you probably know more than me, but I think his influence on Batman continues.
Batman Returns.
So one of the things that Frank did was he took an existing villain named Kingpin, and which was like Marvel's fat guy. He was drawn originally by John Romita Sr., and he made him like a mobster, a mob king, and made him a real threat. He also took another existing villain, Bullseye, made him very, very deadly.
Now, whose villain was Bullseye before then?
It was Daredevil's, but he just wasn't drawn. He just wasn't written very well.
Oh, okay.
So the writing, there's one scene where whenever Frank Miller started drawing Kingpin, he drew him like he'd been drawn, just this real goofy fat guy. There's one scene where he lights a cigarette, and you just see the shadow of his face. Mm-hmm. And he said, once I drew that, Kingpin was mine. He said he was mine then. I made him who I wanted him to be.
So wasn't Kingpin like a Spider-Man villain to begin with?
He goes back and forth between Spider-Man and Daredevil.
Okay.
Even now, because they're based in New York City. Another super character Frank Miller introduced into the Daredevil universe was Elektra. Now, Frank Miller said that he never liked the idea of superheroes having normal girlfriends. So like Superman, Lois Lane, or Spider-Man and Mary Jane. So he didn't like the fact that Matt Murdock, Daredevil, had Karen Page. He said that if you were this big, over-the-top superhero, that you would be attracted to that. And so he said that your lovemaking would be epic and bring buildings down. So he wanted somebody on par with Daredevil, and so he made Elektra. Now, Elektra wasn't a hero. She was kind of a villain, or I guess she was a villain. So you had that problem too. I think they're doing something similar to that to Batman and Catwoman now.
Right.
But yeah, Elektra's definitely Frank Miller's.
Not now. They've been doing it for years.
Been doing it for years.
Yeah.
So yeah, he put Daredevil on the map. And so Daredevil started getting popular. And Daredevil has really drawn some amazing writers and artists over the years. For some reason, this character, Marvel, has really drawn a lot of great people. So Joe Quesada, I think he draws the best Daredevil at all. And he had a 12-issue run with Kevin Smith. And Kevin Smith, I like a lot of his early. he makes movies. He's a director. He made Mallrats.
I think we all know who Kevin Smith
Chasing Amy, Clerks, and a lot of his later stuff I didn't care for, but his early stuff was really inventive. And so he wrote a great story. He took another crappy character, Mysterio, and he fleshed him out. He really touched on the religious parts of Matt's life. Matt's Catholic. Frank Miller once said that only a Catholic could be a lawyer during the day and a vigilante at night.
Right.
And so Kevin Smith touched on that. He also killed Karen Page, and a lot of people got aggravated about that. You know, Karen Page had kind of been put through the ringer. You know, she was this little cute girl that worked in the law office, then found out she had a heroin addiction. She'd done some porn to pay for the heroin addiction. She ended up with AIDS. And then Kevin Smith let Bullseye kill her. And that upset him. But I mean, you know, it was good storytelling. And it kind of pushed Matt Murdock, Daredevil, to the next level.
So he was before J.R.R. Martin. He had no problems killing off characters.
Yeah, absolutely.
What I liked, not to interrupt you,
no,
but
you're good.
I always thought it was cool that Marvel always took a step, even way back before it was PC, to have somebody's differences or their religion or their sexuality determined on what they did and did not do.
Right.
So, like the only two religious characters that I can think of out of comics right offhand, and don't hold it against me, is Nightcrawler and Daredevil.
Right. Right.
And because their religion actually plays so much on their actions of who they are. Now, as the years have gone by, DC stepped up their game and they've done better. And Marvel's always been a step forward when it comes to all that stuff. And I've always been impressed with Marvel as far as that.
Yeah, they continue to push the character. Daredevil's kind of like Marvel's whipping boy, in that they throw everything at him. And really the kind of the backbone of the character is you get knocked down in life, but you just get up again. It doesn't matter how many times you get knocked down. It matters how many times you get up. And that's kind of what they do to Daredevil. Brian Michael Bendis gets a lot of flack for...
Say that name again.
Brian Michael Bendis.
I just like the sound of that name. Michael
Well,
Bendis.
he gets a lot of flack. He's writing Superman now, I think. But he gets a lot of flack for not being a good writer. That's bullcrap. I mean, if you see his Daredevil work, it was outstanding. I mean, I really don't think anybody writes dialogue as good as Brian does. And he really touched on the lawyer aspect of it. You know, I'm a big fan of lawyer shows.
Okay.
You know, I like
CSI or whatever.
well, I like Boston Legal and The Practice and stuff like that. So you know, you can get some real good drama inside the courtroom. It doesn't have to be everything out in the streets just as Daredevil afterwards. So I really like Brian Michael Bendis' run. Ed Brubaker, he did a run right after Brian, and he kind of draws. He kind of writes hard-boiled detective, you know, street level crime stories, and that just flows right into Daredevil perfect. And so I really liked his run on there as well. And so the current Daredevil really got thrown through the ringer on and I mean, just bad relationships. Frank Miller said, you know, he had bad relationships, horrible parentage. I mean, he should have been a supervillain, but for some reason he ended up being a superhero. Well, he kind of got dark there for a while during the Andy Diggle run, but so Mark Waid come along, he kind of reset the butt. He looked at Daredevil as a person that was dealing with depression, which a lot of people do. When you're dealing with the depression, you don't really ever get over it. You just kind of sink or swim with it. You just got to go with it. And so him trying to look at the positive side, him trying to go on with his life, him trying to overcome everything and trying to stay lighthearted. We all know somebody, if we're not ourselves, going through depression. So that was a really, really good run. It was real positive and really kind of took Daredevil full circle back to who he was during the Stan Lee days. Now the current artist is Chuck Cheto, and the current writer is Chip Zdarsky. And so I recently saw an interview with Chip. Really impressed with him as a person. He for a young man, he's got a lot of wisdom, and so he realizes that his popularity is peaked now, and it probably won't stay there, and so he's enjoying it while he's there, but he doesn't base his self-worth on his popularity.
Yeah.
His self-worth elsewhere. But as far as the writing, at first I wasn't too impressed. I left Daredevil during the Charles Soule years. Wasn't a big fan of that. And but I come back recently with Chip Zdarsky, and I've been reading Daredevil for decades.
Right.
So he put Daredevil in prison. That had been done before. Ed Brubaker. He took Daredevil out of the costume. That had been done before. Frank Miller. He had somebody else go into the Daredevil costume, Elektra, and that had been done before.
Why?
Danny Rand had. It's a big long story. So Danny Rand, who's Iron Fist, he actually posed as Daredevil for a while. So he was really just doing stuff that had been done before. But as a new reader, you might not realize that.
Right.
But as an old reader, I did realize that. But a lot of things he did well was I really liked the way he handled religion. He did that with respect. I also liked the way that he took Kingpin, and Kingpin wanted to go legit. And so Kingpin, he started dealing with people outside of New York City. And so he's dealing with like the 1%ers, your Bezos and your Jobs and
Elon Musk.
Yeah, those guys. So he's dealing with obviously not those guys, but people who look just like him, act just like him. We get in trouble if we use their names. So, but anyway, that he was dealing with those 1%ers and found out they just looked at him as some fat punk from New York City, some criminal, some thug.
Right.
And so that kind of shook him up. I really liked that storyline. So Chip, he's hit and miss, but I like his stuff. But yeah, he's a good writer and a great guy. So let's talk about the movies for a second.
Cool. All right.
And the series. So in 2003, they come out with Daredevil. All right, first live action. Well, not first live action Daredevil. Right. First live action Daredevil was in The Trial of Incredible Hulk. They actually had a guy that played Daredevil in it. You didn't miss anything. So I was so excited when this movie come out, and we just recently rewatched it.
Right.
And what was your thoughts on it?
To be honest, I liked it. So when I first seen it, I wanted to poo-poo on it. But actually, now that I've seen it and I've looked back at it, I'm like, this was kind of ahead of its time. If it had come out like maybe 5-10 years after the fact, closer to the Marvel Universal.
Yeah.
What do they call it?
The Marvel Cinematic Universe.
Right, the Marvel Cinematic Universe. It probably would have been able to tie right back in. And the money and the effort and the look that they put into it, I really was impressed. I mean, the costume, good.
Yeah.
Soundtrack, awesome.
Yeah, you love the soundtrack.
I owned the soundtrack and I lost it, and it's just breaking my heart that I can't find it. But yeah, I think now, don't get me wrong, there is a lot of campy phrases and sayings and stuff, and the fact that they got in a fight in a kid's playground and a blind guy's doing flips and landing on crap that nobody should actually be able to do, and even in reality, it's kind of like, But I liked it myself.
I mean, I thought it was okay. I mean, it's one of those things I wanted to like it because I like the character and you're finally getting a big budget. But when this come out, really superhero movies wasn't at the level they are now. Yeah. So if you watch it now and you watch superhero movies now, you're kind of comparing apples and oranges. I mean, you had Superman, you had Tim Burton's Batman.
Right.
But there still had been some kick-butt superhero movies that come out around this time or before. The Crow was one. The first X-Men movie I thought was awesome.
Yeah, but The Crow didn't need special effects.
True. So it's interesting. There's your Batman Daredevil connection again. That Ben Affleck has played both, and then he met Jennifer Garner. She played Elektra.
Before maturity and after maturity.
Yeah, that's true.
He played a mature Batman, and I like that. I like the Ben Affleck Batman because it was more mature.
Yeah. There's nothing wrong with mature, obviously.
But he was a lot younger when he did Daredevil.
Yeah, they had. What'd you think of Michael Clark Duncan as Kingpin?
I like Michael Clark Duncan in pretty much anything he does.
Yeah.
And the fact that he is the size he is, just made him like the perfect.
Well, he was 300 pounds, and they told him he needed to be heavier, so he gained another 30 pounds for that role.
Yeah, but the thing was it didn't look like fat to me. It looked like more muscle than anything. Yeah. When he took Daredevil and picked him above his head, and you're thinking he's getting ready to bust him into the desk, but instead he just slams him into the ceiling. It's like, that's just
if you
badass.
Watch it now, watch the director's cut. It's a little longer, but it's a little more coherent story. But all in all, on a scale of 1 to 10, I'd probably give it 6. What would you give it?
I give it. Back then, I would have gave it a higher rating. Now, I would probably give it about a 7. And the reason is because you could tell some of the effects was different. I like the fact that they didn't give Bullseye some crazy stupid costume. They gave him more of a
street,
but it was 80s. It was It was the
2003
or 2003. Yeah. It was it looked like 80s kind of in a way, but it was kind of an older look. So yeah, I give it about a 7.
7.
Yeah.
Well, the Netflix series, so it come out 2015, 2018, and fantastic. I mean, I loved it. I mean, Charlie Cox as Daredevil did fantastic. You had Deborah Ann Woll as Gwen Stacy. I mean, no, not Gwen Stacy, Karen Page. Karen Page. I mean, and she's such a good actress. She was in True Blood. I mean, to me, she's one of the best actresses.
I never watched True Blood.
And Kingpin, played by Vincent D'Onofrio.
Right.
And do you remember him in the Full Metal Jacket?
Uh-huh.
Yeah. But anyway, at first his Kingpin kind of threw me off because he sounded like he's constipated every time he says something. He's like, "I'm going to get Daredevil." You know, he had this real affected way of talking. And but the whole cast were fantastic. The first season was great. A lot of people poo-pooed on the second season because they had like ninjas and introduced Elektra and everything. But that's really part of Daredevil, and I like that story too. And it was leading into Defenders. And in the third season, they brought in Bullseye, and the guy who played Bullseye did a fantastic job. Now, let me tell you my gripe about live action Daredevil. Well, first of all, you tell me your thoughts on it.
As far as the series, I've only watched the first season. that's as far as I've gotten. And the only reason I've got into that was because we were getting ready to do this video. And what I liked about, what's his first name, the Cox boy?
Charlie Cox.
Cox. Yeah. I liked him better as Matt Murdock than I did him as Daredevil. Okay. It's, I don't know. When I was watching the show, I was enjoying more of the legal part, the human part. The whole superhero part just didn't seem as entertaining to me as when he was playing Matt. I know that's weird because I'm a big geek and I like to see superhero stuff. But I was really enjoying more of the interaction with his partner's name?
Oh, Foggy Nelson.
Foggy Nelson, and how he was connecting with people around him as a human being and stuff, than all the fighting and stuff. Yeah,
Jeff Loeb, he was a director on there, and he did a fantastic job. But the problem I had with Daredevil is that it ended, and there was no reason for it to end because the ratings were through the roof. What happened is that Disney and Netflix, Disney who owns Marvel, they made this series together. So it's not totally owned by Netflix.
Right.
It's not totally owned by Disney. So they'd signed a contract, and similar to what Marvel had done years ago with Fox and Sony, as far as their Spider-Man characters.
Right.
So whenever Disney decided they were going to come out with Disney Plus, a streaming service, they didn't want their characters anywhere else, so they just cut ties with Netflix. Right. So Netflix couldn't continue. They couldn't continue making Daredevil.
But Disney didn't.
And Disney didn't because in the contract, they couldn't do anything with Daredevil for 4 years. And so the rumor is that they're going to have Daredevil by Charlie Cox make a small appearance in the new Spider-Man movie, which they need. I need another Spider-Man movie like I need another Orifice. To be honest with you, make a Daredevil movie. You want to make a Daredevil movie, or put Daredevil on Disney Plus. Put it somewhere. Rehire those guys. That show was fantastic.
Well, I mean, Disney also has an innate ability to only do certain episodes to tell a certain story. Like WandaVision at the moment is only going to be a certain length of time. Loki's only going to be a certain length of time. Everything, they only have so many episodes to set up. You don't know if there's going to be another season because they're going to tell a tale, and when they're done, they're done.
Yeah, I get it, but they should never got rid of that. It didn't have anything to do with popularity. The fans loved it. Just has to do with greed.
Now, see, I haven't watched the Defenders. How did it play out? How did he play out with the Defenders?
They did with Defenders what they did with the Avengers. You had your Thor movie, your Captain America movie, your Iron movie, Iron Man. They put them all together. This was just a street level where they had Jessica Jones and Luke Cage and Matt Murdock and Danny Rand, and they all had their separate shows, and then they put them together.
Right.
And I really liked it. I thought it came out good. So a couple days ago, 3 days ago, a week ago, something like that,
right.
Robert picked these figures up for me.
Right, they're new. You got to get them.
Look, and they're not even punched. Nobody cares about this, but a toy collector, most of the time they punch this little cardboard out when they hang it up, and these are unpunched. These are some retro figures that come out. These look like figures that would come out in the 80s.
Right.
But like the artwork on them is just fantastic, man. I mean, they did great.
The artist, I can't think of his name, but they literally paid an artist to go back and try to re-render all this stuff to make it look like it was the same age.
Yeah, so Hasbro and Marvel, they did good there. I really like these. I'll stick these up on the wall, but I won't poke holes in them. So, all right, man, I think it does it for Daredevil.
Cool.
And, yeah. I forgot to give a shout-out last video to SL. He won the Steel Box Highlander set. Cool. And he's already gotten it, and he said he sat down with a big glass of bourbon and really, really enjoyed it. So I'm happy for you, brother. And then also on our celebrating 200 subscribers, we had to give away for a $25 Visa card for somebody that was out of the country. So the person that won that is from Germany, and that's Alex Hamilton. He won that, and so Guten Tag, Alex. So we will get that mailed out to you as soon as we can. And you know what? I think I'm done.
I'm done.
All right, brother.